Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today.
And we had these two Swedish guys come over, and me and one of my colleagues like, right, we're going to make a really big fire, and you're going to show us this 3D fog attack thing that you talk about. They're like, we're doing it, but we don't think we're doing it as good as you, because you guys say it's absolutely amazing. So we went and sat in this compartment at our training centre, and we got a fire going, and it was one of the ways I started thinking, it's a bit keen in here. And we gave the branch to the Swedish guy, and me and my colleague sat there like going, come on then, show us, show us this amazing thing. And basically one of them shuffled to the door, opened it, and he just blasted the branch on it, and basically just ventilated it. And we came out and they were like, well, why would you mess about and sort of gas cooling something that you don't need to, where you could just put it out? And I was like, okay. And it just showed the evolution from where 3D fog attack, certainly when I joined in 2007, was the go-to firefighting technique pretty much for everything. Right, let's just imagine then we've got a big fire in corner room, and we're going to sit here and we're going to gas cool. Like, when are we going to extinguish the fire via gas cooling? The reality of it is, the fire is continuing to create the conditions, and all you're doing is you're cooling the conditions. Have you heard the combine harvester analogy? Cornfield, cutting the corn, and you've got a child missing in the cornfield. Do you A, search for the child, or B, turn off the combine harvester, then search for the child? And that for me was like eureka, like making conditions better. And if we open this and we do that, and the reality of it is, if we put the fire out, it'll stop creating the smoke, stop creating the bad conditions, then we can do it. And I always turn around to the recruits and say, look, in every walk of life, you're always going to find people who find something negative to say about everything. It's up to you to make your decisions. I said, just remember that day, on day one, when you pulled that uniform on for the first time, and you undoubtedly checked yourself in the mirror, and you undoubtedly felt a swell of pride that I'm giving back to my community. I'm in a service that's respected by the public, because we still are. It's still an amazing career. And I always said to them, I said, listen, when you get on station, or when you bump into people outside a station or in general life who are negative about the career and all that, remember, your career is unique to you. You be you, and you remember that day when you put that uniform on.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents, and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. Gary, welcome to the podcast, my friend. How the hell are you?
I'm good, Pete. Thanks very much for inviting me on, mate. I'm honoured, to be honest.
Mate, I'm so glad we were able to get this going so quick, because people will know, like, when we have guests on the podcast, sometimes, well, what people don't know, sometimes it can take years. Not because anyone doesn't want to go or anything, like, we're all just so busy. But you and I kind of caught ourselves crossing paths at the right time in the right moment. Obviously, we both know Mark and some of the silly craziness he does, and that's one element and avenue, bless him, of the UK Fire and Rescue Service. But if you could start off by giving us a whistle-stop tour of kind of when you joined the emergency services and kind of why you joined, I suppose, and how you find yourself speaking to me on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, so I suppose I'm a little bit of like an outlier to a degree. So a lot of people I've had a lot of interactions with through recruit training or whatever have always said, oh yeah, it's always been my dream. I've always wanted to join fire service since being a little boy, a little girl. And I'm not like that.
Yeah.
So I grew up in sort of the north of England. And my only goal really in life was, due to my lack of being able to be academic through just not enjoying it,
Okay,
I wanted to join the military, basically, from dot. A little bit of family history in the military, lots of aunties and uncles. I didn't really feel like I fitted into many sort of social groups at school and things. And basically from the age of about 13, 14, everything was just earmarked towards the military. Saw the fancy recruitment videos that involved skiing and football and things like that, and thought, do you know what, it gets me away from
that.
It gets me away from here, and a little bit of that. So my journey to the emergency services really came I dare say a little bit out of necessity, as opposed to like a real sort of desire to join the emergency
Yeah.
services. After my military career came to an end, as most people do when you get a little bit older, I couldn't leave the military and spend time sitting around, so I had to get a job. And
Mm.
I firstly got a job in the private sector of the prison service, and that was enlightening. And then I saw
That's
the brigade.
hard. My father-in-law did, I think he did 18 years in the military and then he did 20 years in the prison service. And that, even though people think, oh, it's disciplined and it's about rules and it's uniform, whole different sector to move into. And he struggled with it a little bit in the first couple of years. I remember him telling me moving out of sort of the military, the department that he was in, because he was to do something with code breaking, or he used to work somewhere where he could never use any phones. He never talks about it, even though he's in his 90s. I'm like, dude, you can tell somebody now. It's not a state secret. You'll be fine. But he still keeps it quite close to his chest. But I mean, tell us the real difference of switching those sectors, because obviously you stayed there for a brief time before finding a home in the military services.
Yeah, I'll be open. I've been very open about it in the past. I really struggled with the transition from the military to sort of civilian life and then into the emergency services. And I think part of that was because all I'd ever seen myself doing was the military. And
Okay.
as happens in all walks of life, you kind of have these grand plans for how your life plans out, and things change. And I never planned for anything outside of the military. I was that kind of guy who was like, 22 years, this is me. I get to 22 years, I'll leave. I'll
Even that
holiday in
short though,
Spain.
you know, when people
Yeah,
say
it is.
that,
Yeah,
they're like
yeah, it's
20,
very short.
you'll be what? You'll be 35, 40 when you leave. You're not even halfway through life. You know, what are you going to do for 40 years?
I turned 39 this October, and
Hmm.
this would have been my 22nd year. So this would have been my
Wow.
sort of retirement now. But yeah, I really struggled with it. I think twofold. One, the real differences between civilian street, the military,
Hmm.
the prison, and then even the emergency services after that. But also that I was kind of trying to find myself again, because I always been the soldier that I wanted to be, and
Yes,
suddenly
mate.
I've
Yes.
been stripped of that uniform, and now I'm not that. So what
We
am I?
make it
Where do
so
I
much of
fit?
our identity, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely, and like,
Weird.
yeah, very very strange. But and I think the military and the fire service are very very similar in terms of you can become quite institutionalized to it. But
Yeah,
I
man.
suppose the way I could explain it is the military is like the fire service but on steroids, because you
I
live,
always say
breathe,
that.
and like everything is work. So you live on camp,
Yeah.
you associate with people from the military, and when you step out of that, even after just 6 years for me, it was difficult. I'll be honest, it was difficult. I remember walking out the camp gates and thinking, right, sort of now what? I had a job to go to, but I was like, right, okay, so I'm not part of that gang anymore. So now what?
It
Now what
is that,
happens
isn't it?
then?
As much as we say, like, oh no, you know, these are my mates and I'll still do it. And they don't like, but I don't know what your situation was like. I wouldn't pretend to know, but it's like people don't inherently try and distance themselves, but their life is still going on. You know, and you
Yeah,
see this when people retire from the fire service. It's like they just don't see people anymore because we see each other because we're at work. Yes, we're mates at work, but we are mates outside of work, but you just don't see them anymore. And that kind of time distance does create an unspoken void because that person is still doing the thing every day and they're not maliciously not having contact with you, but you just kind of come adrift, don't you?
yeah, 100%. And that was one of the biggest things I had to get my head around when I first left, because mates for life, that old saying that comes with
Yeah,
joining
yeah.
the military, and 100% the mates for life. But it's like you say, once someone's not there anymore, it's not that it's a conscious effort to forget them. It's just they're not there anymore. They
Yeah,
are ultimately forgotten about.
yeah.
And what I think happens around the military as well is it goes through like sort of phases in time where you have association with a particular event in that time. So like around my time was the sort of the last Gulf War and tours of Iraq, and you get that bond from lads and lasses who you've been on them tours with, and you've always got that common ground or something to talk about. And then obviously when I left in sort of 2000, late 2006, early 2007, the war in Afghanistan really kicked off for the
Yeah.
British troops, and that kind of became the new
They
sort
all
of
went off, and then when you did
camaraderie.
see
Yeah,
them in 5 years, they were all talking about that, and you're like, "Oh yeah, is that everybody remember the other thing?" And they're like, "Yeah,
yeah,
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 yeah." Yeah." And then they're talking about the thing again.
yeah,
You
yeah.
weren't there.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And then that took me a bit of time to really get my head around. And you start questioning yourself, and you start, potentially overthinking and things like that, which I definitely did.
Mm.
But then I kind of began to see it for what it is. And the weird thing is that since, I mean, I've been out of the military now for almost 17 years, and
Wow.
I've unfortunately had to visit funerals and stuff of lads who I served with, like pretty recently. And it's really funny that I dropped back in with the lads who I was with then, and it's like nothing's changed. It's like I've never been away. It's like, you know, the same banter, the same. So
Yeah.
everything. It's like you know, we're all a bit grey, a bit fatter. There's lads with a bit more scrambled egg on the shoulder, but ultimately it all just falls back to the same thing. And it's
Yes, mate.
I suppose that's the beauty of it, and it's the
They're the
same with the
best
fire
ones.
service.
I
Yeah,
have it, mate.
yeah,
So honestly, some of my closest friends are people I've met through the podcast, and ironically, some of them I've never actually met. I met somebody for the first time like a month ago who I've been friends with for over 2 years. We've had loads of great conversations, and then I finally met him for the first time, and it's like I'd known him for 20 years. You know, me and their family went and did a hike somewhere, and we stayed over in a caravan and had a right laugh, cooked some food together. They're the best relationships, but you do have those moments where you meet again for the first time after a year or two, and you're like, oh God, I wonder. And then 5 minutes in, it's like you never left.
Yeah, 100%. So my journey to the emergency services was probably a little bit different to a lot of people I speak to. So yeah, I joined the private sector, the prison service for a bit. I only did a very, very short time. I was transporting prisoners from prison to prison when they were being moved for visits and recategorized and things like that. So I did that for a bit. But if I'm really honest, the pay were rubbish and the working conditions weren't fantastic either. And then I saw the brigade that I'm part of now recruit, and I thought, you know what? I can see the parallels between the fire service and the military, and maybe that's where I can sort of go and find myself again, and applied, and then found myself on the recruits course sort of early 2007, and then been there.
How old would you have been going into the recruits course? Because I obviously have it now in the training department, seeing different people at different ages and different developments. Some have just come from the RAF in the recent cohort, and they do seem to just get it a bit easier. But I also think that's kind of hard. I mean, most of them are great. You get the odd dick that even though they get it, they're astonished as to why other people don't get it. But like when you were there, was there anybody else who was like 18 years of age, you know, just coming out of school, and it's like, wow, we've had different life experiences?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I always remember us first day on the course, they were like, partner up with someone and learn something about them, and then you deliver their story. And I was like, all right, cool, yeah. So I sat down with this young lad who was 18, and I was like, right, so tell me something about you, mate. And he's like, yeah, left school, collected trolleys at Asda, and then I'm here. And I was like, okay,
and
mate,
I'm really into Call of Duty.
Yeah, I've got to give 5 minutes. Have you got anything else like from it than just trolleys? And he's like,
my
no,
dog's
not
name
really.
is Jasmine. Like, oh, cool. All right, yeah, magic. All right.
Kind of scratching my head going, okay, but yes. So I was.
And he's on the 5th page of notes for yours.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah,
and then what did you do? Well, then I was like, Jesus, right? Okay, 1 minute. I need another pen.
I think I was like 22, 23. So I joined the military at nearly 17, and I actually had. When I joined the fire service in 2007, I'd only officially left the military sort of a couple of months before. So my military service is actually 6 years, but I actually got out around 5.5. They let me out early to go and get a job.
You can go back within like 18 months, can't you? They leave like an open door thing, don't they, usually?
Yeah, I was never going back. There's no chance I was never going back. No,
some people might, because again, they hear about their mate who's, you know, the electrician, or their mate who is the manager at the local Sainsbury's, and they're like, oh, you know, I could be at home with my wife every day and be on 40 grand a year, and that'd be great. And then they go there, and it wasn't like they said it was going to be. And like again, if you didn't find something other than a prison service, if that just didn't gel for you, and you didn't find something else, some people do turn back and go, you know what, I headed out over the ridge and I didn't like what I saw, and even though it's going to have to put my hand up and say I made a mistake, that they can still, a lot of them can go back, can't they?
Absolutely. And the time I got out, so 2006, 2007, the recession was pinching pretty hard, and you know, it was hard to get a mortgage. There weren't many jobs, and a lot of lads I left with around a similar time did go back, and I'm sort of thankful and I'm very lucky that I dropped into sort of two jobs that had a little bit of security and allowed me to have that transition from the military to civilian life a little bit more smoother. I think if I'd have been scratching around for a job and all that type of stuff, then do you know what? I might have fell back onto it. It might have been a bit of a crutch to go back to, because I knew it so well and I could do it. But
to some people as well, sometimes you've got to go and do something shit to realize what you were doing. Maybe in military, maybe whatever you were doing before. You get complacent. You don't appreciate what you've got. But equally, some people then find the thing they're looking for, which is also great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of probably bugbear, I wouldn't say, but one of the things where you get some people who are quite young who join the fire service, and they can fall into a habit sometimes of chuntering about how crap it is. And I think, well, before I joined the military, I packed bananas for Del Monte for a bit, and that was shit. And then I also sold damp proofing to people for a bit. That were also crap. And
Oh,
then
yeah,
I
but
spent
door
6 years
knocking
like,
is a real
yeah,
character building thing. If you have to go knock on people's doors, I suggest everybody at some point works in sales in their life because it is rough.
yeah, it is. So like now, even when we used to get like, relieving at 3, 4 in the morning to like a big pile of muck
Yeah.
somewhere, I was like, yeah, but this in like digging trenches in snow on top of a hill
Oh,
in
yeah,
Canada.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Like this to me is fine. Like I go to bed tomorrow and I get home and it'll all be fine.
Yeah,
And
when
yeah,
you pass them guys and girls on the motorway and they're there 3 in the morning, knee deep in it, and you're like, that would suck. And I'm sure
yeah,
someone
yeah,
would love it, and that's wonderful. But for me personally, I'd be like, I couldn't do that shit. Jesus, I
yeah,
would really
absolutely.
struggle.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
how soon
100%.
into joining the emergency services, because you obviously had a lot of experience before, did that appetite for going, and because obviously you're a station manager level in the UK Fire and Rescue Service now, so a fairly logical ascent through the sort of career path, but some would argue quite a quick one. But then again,
Yeah,
if they didn't have a similar sort of background, because people get worried about all these like direct entry stuff going on these days, and they're like, oh, but so and so, if that girl comes in at direct entry, she doesn't know anything about it. Yeah, but what if she's already done 15 years in the RAF? And they go, oh, that'd be
yeah,
different then. And I'm like, exactly. So not everyone's the same.
yeah. I kind of did the conventional route, if you like, where
Yeah.
I left training school and I went and did sort of 6, 7 years as a sort of firefighter, driving, BA wearing, cutting cars up, all the really cool Gucci stuff that you want to do when you first join up. And I kind of did that, and I flitted around a different few stations. I worked in some of our busier districts, some of our quieter districts, and then I kind of did what I think everybody does, that when I started having kids and stuff, I kind of gravitated to somewhere closer to home and
Yeah.
that type of thing. And being really honest, I kind of never had the big aspirations for promotion.
Hmm.
I basically, if I'm honest, got a little bit fed up. We had
Mate,
we'd
I
had
do
this.
that. Hmm.
Me and my son had me and my wife had my son, and she was back at work, and I was like working sort of 4 on 4 off, and then on my days off, I was looking for my son. And babies are like, up until a point, they basically you just feed them, keep them alive, and they
Yeah.
provide very little entertainment to a degree. So I was like
I struggle
beginning
with
to,
all my kids in their first couple of years. I felt like a terrible dad because I didn't think I was getting the chemical reward that I thought I should. People talk about it as a really magical time, and I felt terrible because I was like, I'm not. This thing's not even got its own personality yet. I just didn't really know what to do. I felt really rough until I spoke to other parents that were like, "No, man, that changes. You're right. It's a small human being. You wouldn't even know if it's yours or not for a guy. For me, I'm just talking about my own personal experience. I was like, I didn't feel a connection, and I struggled with that for a while, to be honest.
yeah, agreed. So I found myself sort of going to work, sort of going through the motions, getting a little bit fed up, and I thought, you know what, I need to freshen this up. I need to give myself something different. So I went for a bit of temporary promotion, went temporary for a bit. Obviously, the relevant courses went temporary, and to be honest, it was a bit of a disaster. I went temporary to a station
Okay.
that I very rarely were in the front. I was always still in the back as a crew manager,
Yeah. You get that
doing a
on
lot.
bomb pump stations, don't you? Where the
Yeah,
other JO's never off. So you're like
yeah.
a glorified firefighter and you don't really get the exposure.
Even worse because it was one pump and a special, and the
Yeah.
special was basically all our sort of dried sand, high X foam, welfare stuff, toilets, that type of thing. And it like
Mm.
rolled out the doors maybe 3 times a year. And I was basically just sat gaffering that. And I was like,
Yeah.
this is not what I intended to be doing. So I
I'm in,
actually,
I'm in charge of the T wagon. Or is
yeah,
that is
yeah,
that what
pretty
I've
much, yeah.
ascended to?
Yeah, so I pretty much chucked my bars in, to be honest, which were obviously.
Oh no.
I always remember the station manager at the time, who's now retired. Obviously, I won't name him, but he said, "You do realise, Dev, you're committing career suicide here by chucking these in. You will not get a job in the next 12 months because you're basically like tapped out kind of thing." And I was like, "All right, okay, fine, but I'm not happy. I want to go back to station." So I went back to my original shift, and I instantly knew within a tour that I'd made the wrong decision, that I didn't want to
Really?
be a firefighter anymore. So then,
It's a
luckily for
little,
me,
mate. Sorry, see that bit there. You're so right. Even though you didn't get the exposure you want, I always say to people, an idea is like a balloon. Once you've inflated the balloon, it never goes back to where it was before. Do you know what I mean? You can't reverse that. You can't put it back in the Pandora's box. Once you've seen there's a little bit more, and then somebody goes, "Oh, now back to," it's like being put back in the friend zone after you've slept with a mate or something like that. It's like you can't go back to that. It just never feels
yeah,
the same again.
yeah, we have a bit of a saying at our place. It's like a peek behind the curtain. Once you had a peek behind the curtain, it's hard to not know what's behind that curtain anymore.
I know what's
Um,
that.
so I chucked my bars and went back, and then, like I said, I pretty much straight away knew that I'd made a bad decision. And then, kind of luckily for me, I just happened to go detached back to the station that I'd just escaped from,
Yeah.
but as a driver. And I dropped on another lad who I knew, just basically done the similar to me, but he was quite close to his retirement. And
Right.
he said, "Oh, I thought you were acting up." And I said, "Oh yeah, I were." I said, "But I wasn't really enjoying it and stuff." And he went, "Well, I've just bust myself down. Like, why don't you try and come to our place?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right." So I had the qualifications for the skill set of the station, and
Yeah.
I basically texted the station manager and said, "Look, I've heard that you
So-and-so
shy a
stuff,
crew
yeah.
manager. Like, can I come over?" And he got me over, and then I spent about 12 months there. Had some pretty decent jobs, to be fair, some pretty gnarly jobs, and then went through the process, got promoted, and then eventually found my way into training school. And again, I begin to look back over my career and think I'm a little bit of like a product of just opportunity. I went in on a
Yeah.
I went in on a course to training school. I think it was quite well known that I'd wanted to go into training school at some point. I'd wanted to teach and to help and support people and things like that. And I went in on a course and I got approached again saying, "Look, Dev, I'm trying to get out of here, and I can't get out until someone comes in. And I've heard you might want to come in. Do you want to come in?" So I was like, "Oh, I need to go and obviously have a discussion with family because I got a daughter by this point. So I got my son, my daughter, and my wife." And I sat down with
It
my
is big
parents.
because
So I've been,
people don't realize that. It's good to say that people don't realize a lot of training development centers work on like a 9-day fortnight or they work a 9 to 5. So it is, whilst it's usually a bit of a pay rise, I know most places get like a 12%, sometimes additional, but it is a big change to your day-to-day life. If you do something outside of it, whether it's sports, recreation, you run another business, you got to jack some of that in. It's got to make room for it.
we do in ours 5 on 4 off, so you still get your 4 off. But
Wow.
like where our training center is compared to where I live, is still it's 30 miles away. So it was a 60-mile round trip for me every day.
Yeah.
But it was something I wanted to do, and I didn't want to miss the opportunity. If I'm honest, I wanted to work with recruits. That was ultimately why I wanted to get in training school, and
100%,
it's always made me laugh over the years when I was in there when people come in and go, "I can't wait to work with recruits." And I went, "All right, get through your first recruits course, then we'll have a discussion again after that." Because again, the work and the commitment, and it's almost like doing the recruits course again with the recruits.
Yes.
So
People are so used to working with people that are already slightly competent human beings. I'm not saying that recruits aren't, but you make so many assumptions about what firefighters are like. But with recruits, because they've got no context to put any of the information into, they do random stuff that you just couldn't even think they would do because you're so conditioned to what you would expect somebody to do. So the cognitive load that you expend, I think, on the first few modules, the first few courses, is significantly more than if you're then teaching, BA or RTC or rope rescue down the line, because you've got to watch them all the time.
yeah, and what always used to make me laugh were some of the questions you'd get where you were
Yeah.
like, "I have no idea where that's been plucked out from, and I
Yeah.
don't know the
Great
answer to it, but
question.
I'll
No
find out
idea.
and I'll come back." So it's like like you'd go through, I don't know, an LPP, for example, go through an LPP, and like
Yeah.
well, normally you go through a crew in LPP, you pretty much say, right, come on, lads, lasses, tell me a bit about the LPP. And they can pretty much guide the learning to a degree.
Yeah.
They know it and you can steer them back on and things like that. Whereas with a recruit, you should be talking through an LPP and you might talk about, the primer. And they'll
Yeah.
say, "Well, what's it made of?"
Yeah.
Okay, I'll find that out for you and I'll come back to you. But like,
Yeah.
not a question that anybody else would come up with, but they seem to
Because you
come up
don't
with
want to
it.
be
And
the parent that just says, because I said so.
yeah,
You're like,
exactly.
no,
Yeah,
that's not
exactly.
going to help.
And also, I don't think that I've never my
No.
stance always in training school has always been to, if I don't know the answer, teaching recruits whole
Yeah.
time on call. If I don't know the answer, I'll open up and say, "Do you know what? I don't know. I'll find out though, and I'll come back to you."
Yeah.
Because I feel like it builds credibility. The fact that you're not
100%.
saying that I'm the oracle, because nobody is the oracle in all
No.
honesty. So I found myself into the training center, and then I'll be really, really honest. I'm in my 17th year now, and the best time of my career, 100% the best time of my career. The hardest I've ever worked, the hardest I probably ever will work from a
Yeah.
physical point of view, but undoubtedly the best time of my career.
Because if you
Fantastic.
don't do the thing, usually, even though no matter how big or small your training department is, even, LFBs and the Capitas of the world and, larger West Mids, whatever, big training schools, there's still no one coming on after you. It's not like you can hand it over to the night shift. Do you know what I mean? You've got to stay late to get the thing done. You've got to come in early to prep the course, to unlock everything, to prep the scenario, to load the buildings, whatever it might be. That's not going to happen if you don't do it. And then it's everything else because you micromanage that person if they've got a learning difficulty, if they can't get somewhere, they've got a PPE issue, they've got, and you have to do all of that for them. Then you take on all of that.
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of prided myself to a degree of being like, go that bit further for you. If you're struggling, I'll help you. If you need a phone call, I'll help you. Like,
pop out
even
to
with
that
recruits,
station at 7 at night, and then I'm going to go there on the Sunday morning, and it's all those bits.
Yeah, and I don't really know where that comes from, to be honest. And I know people listening might think, "Oh, it sounds like a bit of a big timer, this guy," but no, it just kind of like ingrained in me a bit. I felt like I had a duty as a training instructor,
because
to
otherwise
give
they're just
people
out there adrift, and they'll politely say, "Oh, well, no, if you can't, that's fine," and you're like, "Yeah, but then who else is going to do it?" And you're not the savior of the fire, neither am I. Nobody is, but it's like this person's experience is going to be, I've asked once, and the service, whether it's you, me, whoever, said no. They didn't say it maliciously. They just said, "Oh, well, you didn't get it. Don't worry about it." And they'll go away feeling like, "Oh, that was a bit shit," or "I didn't get what I wanted," or "I didn't feel supported." And that'll affect their whole career. That'll be part of the story they tell one day when they're like, "Yeah, my induction wasn't really that great. The guy said he'd do stuff and he didn't do it, and I've kind of felt like just left to my own devices, to be honest." And that's terrible.
Yeah, 100%. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely been times I think I could have maybe done a bit more there, but that's the reality. That's life. I probably were a bit guilty of spreading myself a bit thin from time to time. Where they'd be like, "Oh, we need someone in to do ladders." Yeah, I'll do that. And then a quick text to the missus. "Oh, I'm working Tuesday now." And probably
okay, that's fine, but you remember you're supposed to be at so and so's. What's it? Or who's picking up him now? And you're like, "Oh, can you just?" And you're like,
yeah, exactly, yeah. But yeah, so found my way in there, and then our training department's quite unique, as in we don't get the pay rise that you talk about. We just carried the rank in there.
Brutal.
So we work 5 on 4 off in there. You carry your rank, but also we teach every subject. So we don't have a sort of BA department, trauma department, working out department, that type of stuff. Water department. We have like just a general instructor who teaches literally everything. So my first 3-4 months in training school was just a blur of the fire service college, course after course after course after course after course, to get me to a level where I could at least help out on courses. And then so I spent the first 12 months flitting between the fire service college and teaching recruits with one of the senior hands, and then very quickly, as it happens in training development centre and in the fire service in general, a big quick churn of instructors, and then I kind of blinked, and I'm a temporary watch manager, and suddenly I'm the old hand in training school, and then that brings new challenges then, where suddenly people are looking at you for guidance, looking at you for sort of being as close to the oracle as you can be, and suddenly that person who you look towards, you're that person.
100%. And then every now and again, sometimes you'll come across a course, or they'll try and reinvent a thing, and you'll go back to look at the materials, and you'll be like, "This is 14 years old. Shit. I've got to rewrite all this, or I've got to go out there and try and deliver this in a week's time." And you're like, "Oh no, why did we pick this one back up?"
The funny thing now is, obviously, in my role now, I see quite a lot of people, and occasionally they'll be there. "Oh, that were a right load of rubbish that you used to in training school," and I have to be like, "Well, kind of wrote that, guys, and this is the reason why it were like that," kind of thing. But it's just the evolution of training, really.
Yes.
But yeah, like I say, I couldn't sort of have enough words to say about how fantastic that period of time in my career were, in terms of
but also from
learning.
There, we brushed over the fire service college there, and there's lots of places and facilities and organisations that deliver the instructor courses. But that's a wonderful getting your head out of your own service and going to learn how things are done in different places, and the people that you meet and the network you develop through that can also feed you for the rest of your career as well. That's really a useful professional development aspect that I think a lot of people don't think about going into the training department.
Yeah, and I always remember years ago, a gaffer saying to me, like, networking is quite important in fire service. I remember thinking at the time, like, networking, to be honest, just sounds a bit like ass kissing. Yeah, it sounds a bit like ass kissing. But and now, sort of 7 years on from joining training school, I absolutely see the merit in it, because now, and particularly in the role that I moved into as a station manager initially, I had that availability to just pick up the phone, text somebody in another brigade in the south of England, the north of England, Scotland, wherever, and go, "Guys, what are you doing about this?"
Yeah.
And like, they come back and go, "Oh, we're doing this, this, and this." But the benefit of having it at sort of your level as well, that you get the real ground truth, as opposed
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
if you
You
sometimes
hear
approach a
networking and you
service.
think it's like senior leaders with a cup of tea in their hand going, hello, I'm really important. Are you really important? Yes, I'm really important as well. Great to meet you. But it's not like that. You know, networking is just sat on the back of a truck between a drill and you're just shooting the shit. You're just chatting about whatever and you learn about their brigade and their people, the good, the bad, the ugly, how they overcame it. That's networking. You know, it's just the term we give it. It sounds a bit businessy, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, 100%. And the guys who I met on my courses down at Fire Service College, because I did a lot, and not only there, but sort of with water rescue training and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. I'm still in touch with a lot of them now. Some of them are even retired, but I'm still in touch with them because you grow that bond, and almost because you're not from their service and they're not from your service, they're even more interesting because they're like
Yeah.
different. So you're like, all right, I'm really interested in what you guys do about this. And
Yeah.
had some great debates normally over a beer about how their policy's slightly better than ours, and ours
Yeah.
is not as
And
good as
also
theirs, and kit
stops
and
you getting stuck
equipment.
in an
And
echo chamber because you can zoom out. And no, I'm not talking about GDPR, but you trust them because there's no point in them telling anybody anything anyway because they don't know anybody in your service. And you can like ask them about this and that and not necessarily say people's names, but say, look, we've had this or we failed somebody for that or we're starting. And they'll go, oh, has nobody read this document? Why don't you send one of your letter to? I'll email you this thing over. And you're like, oh, good. Because we were all stuck with our blinkers on, staring inside our own service and we just didn't have a chance to zoom out. You spoke about the electric vehicle stuff before we went live today, and like that's my attempt to, again, like the whole podcast does, just drag somebody in who is genuine subject matter expert. He didn't know anything about, well, he knows lots about the fire service, but he's not a firefighter, but it's that person that you go, you know what, yeah, 20, 40, 80% of that's useful. And the rest of it doesn't apply to us, or he's talking a load of rubbish. But so much of it is useful to just throw that into the cocktail of your mental, churn and go, you know what, we'll use a bit of that and then we'll throw the rest away.
yeah, 100%. And I think that's where the value is in the emergency services in general. I mean, now incidents with multiple agencies and things like that, and we do a lot of multi-agency training, and that's got massive value as well in terms of we've had
Yeah.
paramedics come to do RTC training, and they sometimes go, "Wow, we didn't even know you could do that," and
Yeah.
we kind of just thought you chopped the roof off, and we were like, "Well, no, we can offer you this, and we can offer you
Yeah.
that,"
Just
and
ask us.
ultimately,
If you ask us to do the thing, well, of course, we thought we'd never seen you do the thing. So, like, we didn't know if it wasn't your job. No, it's just you never said. Well, of course, we can do that. We don't mind.
thing is as well, once you build them relationships like sort of carry on. So, like I know one of the pilots from the local air ambulance, which is, it's
Oh, mate, I'd love to have him on. That'd be a great chat. See what he's like, but
definitely
like
put you on.
that is a
Definitely,
sector we've not gone into.
he's an ex-squaddy as well, and he's got some great tales.
Oh,
So yeah,
wicked.
I'll put him in. But yeah, like even that, just building them little relationships where I can pick up a text him and say, what time do you guys fly till? Like, is there ever a time when they've not got a doctor on? Do you guys carry blood? Things
Yeah.
like this where at times you're like at training centre you might get, oh well, what the helimed do, and you're like, oh, I can find out for you, and just
Yeah.
and that's from courses and incidents and things like that. And I really think that
But yeah, when
sort
you're
of
at an
cross.
incident and somebody goes, well, our next plan for this worst case scenario is we're going to call helimed for ABC, and you can go, oh, well, just throwing my hand in the air there, boss. I mean, they don't actually do that, or they haven't got that facility, so we might need to maybe just consult with them or speak to control, or because they do that. Last guy I spoke to a year ago, he says they won't do that. Do you know what I mean? People
Yeah,
have said, like, I've had crane rescues before, and they're like, we'll just call in this, and I'm like, they don't fly at night, and the wind speed up there at the minute, they wouldn't fly in it just
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
my brother-in-law does it. So it's like, maybe I might be wrong, but it's worth again throwing those things into the cocktail.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, that cross pollination, I know we can tag it with Jessup and all that, but even
Yeah,
like dial away from all the sort of big fancy words and things. But
yeah,
just being able to talk on a human level is
yeah,
is is important, and
super
and
important.
and them guys are the same as well.
You haven't got to wait for a formal regional meeting of Jessup to just ask these questions and just shoot stuff out there into the atmosphere and see what you get back.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And yeah, my time in training school definitely helped with that. I did a PHCLS course up in Liverpool with a company, and like there was literally four of us. We were the only firefighters on it, and the rest of them were trauma nurses, paramedics, doctors. Like, and I'll be honest, like the second day, I remember thinking, like no, in fact, it was a 4-day course, and the first day was particularly put on for firefighters, which was basically just to explain or the medical teach that they were going to talk
Just
about.
bring you up so you can
Yeah,
participate in the next few days, because you sit there and go, what am I doing in this room?
yeah.
Jesus.
But the weird thing about that course was, firefighters, we actually succeeded throughout the course sometimes better than the people who had this a massive skill set, because we just kept it very basic, because
Mm.
we didn't understand the complexities. So we kept it basic, and sometimes keeping it basic is just what you need. We can
Yeah.
we can talk about all the fancy stuff and complexities, and you start talking about sort of PHTLS, and you can talk about tension pneumothoraxes and things like that. Reality, it's a chest problem that we can't really, as firefighters, we can't do much about at the incident. Just
Yeah.
try and identify it and get them away.
Yeah.
And like things like that, courses like that, and I'm still in touch with some of them guys from that course as well. So again, you've got that sort of quick text. Has this changed? Like we
Yeah.
were talking about this on the first aid course. Is this still the case, or has that changed? Or
Mm.
I think it's worth its weight in gold. It really is. And,
100%.
I think it's definitely evolved in the time that I've been in training school and out of training school. In terms of, I feel like we certainly in my service work much closer with partner agencies and even councils and things like that. We're much more aligned now compared to what we probably were when I were a firefighter, I think.
One of the things we spoke about before we came on, I'd love to go into a little bit of detail about, because we had a few conversations recently. We've not released one of them actually, but it was the inventor Michael Reich, Dr. Michael Reich, sorry, the inventor of the smoke curtain, and he was talking about methods of ventilation, and he was talking about Grenfell, and I just shut up because I got lost very quickly in that conversation. Very, very smart guy, but it did make me think again about how long it's been on the podcast since we spoke about some of the TAC vent stuff. And in a lot of services in the UK, we're still jumping between different phases and our aversion to offensive tactical ventilation. Now, I'm by no means a subject matter expert. I know you've obviously done your instructor course. I've got mine, I think, later on this year. Yeah, in October, I think it is. But your service, I don't think you guys and girls don't do offensive either yet. Neither do we. We kind of moved away from it. People worry about losing buildings and losing control of stuff. But I just wanted to explore that from your time as an instructor, about your thoughts on where we're kind of at with it. We've obviously lost a lot of experience across the UK Fire and Rescue Service. So how we've adapted for that in our aversion to maybe using offensive, ventilation techniques.
Yeah, I have a bit of an evolution with TACVENT and offensive PPV. So we're actually bordered by a lot of brigades who do offensive PPV, and obviously we have cross-border incidents where we have memorandums of understanding to allow them to still use offensive PPV with us there.
Okay.
And my evolution is that I saw PPV offensive. I'm not going to say used wrongly, but having a bad outcome as opposed to a good outcome.
Unintended, results.
An unintended outcome, and that kind of planted the seed in me where I was like, I don't really like this. This looks dangerous to me. We're pumping air, we're pumping oxygen into a fire, and the very simple terms is air makes it get bigger, less air makes it get smaller,
I waft
water
a
makes it get
thing,
smaller
the thing
again.
gets bigger. We've seen that from Indians wafting fires,
Yeah,
hundreds of years ago. So then we think, oh, let's push some more stuff at the fire, and we go, no, surely that's wrong.
yeah, exactly. So I went into training centre, and like I said, we were still only using sort of defensive tactics, smoke clearance, that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I went into training school, and as you are, they put me on the TACVENT instructor's course, and I was like, was a bit determined, got a bit between my teeth. I was like, right, you lot are going to prove to me that this is good, because I've decided that it's not. And like, I'd wrongly come to the conclusion that it's really dangerous, and I'd seen it go wrong and all that type of stuff. And I went down there, and I remember bumping into some guys from Hereford and Worcester, and they'd had PPV for quite some time, offensively. And they were like ninjas on our course. I was like really, really impressed with how it was just second nature, and they were absolutely bang on with it. And I went down there, and I said to one of the colleagues I went down with, I said, look, I want them to prove to me that this is good. I said, so everything that they say we can do, I'm doing. Like, so when they say you can stand in front of the fire, with offensive PPV as it's blowing the product combustion out the open vent, I can stand there and open the branch. I said, I am standing there and I'm opening the branch. I said, and I'm gonna absolutely satisfy myself that this is as good as they say.
It's like when someone tells you something, you go, see, feel how smooth that was, and you did it, and it felt horrible, and then you go, yeah, that felt great, and you're like, I'm not doing that again. It's like, exactly. I'm not going to play that game where everyone goes, yeah, that was really good, and back in mind they're like, that was a bit of shit. I'm not going to do that myself.
Yeah, so I almost became that you don't really want on the course sometimes. Who's like, no, I don't believe you, prove it. So we did the first day. They take you down and they build a fire, and you're sitting there as you do on your you do when you first join the service, where you start talking about paralysation and lowering neutral planes. And look, I open this door, the neutral plane goes up for a period of time, and then the fire suddenly gets bigger. We get a clean burn, and all them types of things that we talk about in fire behaviour world. And then they're like, right, we're going to put this fan on, and we're going to open that vent, and we're going to rattle it out the vent, and then you lot will be able to stand up and take your glove off, and like hold your hand up in the air, and it'll show how amazing like the conditions are. And I was like, okay, I'm taking my glove off. Like I'm not none of this like peeling the cuff. It's coming off, and I'm standing there,
keeping it up like a shy
yeah,
child.
yeah. And I'm like, if you burn me, it's your problem. You've told me this is amazing. So we went in and I did it, and I was like, yeah, it's pretty damn good, to be fair. And then as the course evolves and you start getting involved in then using it for firefighting in sort of an offensive way. And I mean, even such as that. So for the listeners who may not be in the fire service, there's sort of three phases to it. One is very much defensive, where the fire's extinguished and we just use it to clear smoke. The second one has two elements to it. It has a defensive element and a sort of attack element. The way I remember it, because I'm a simpleton, is anything that has an effect on the fire is in an attack phase. Anything that doesn't affect the fire is in a defensive phase. I think that's kind of an easy way I remember it. Yep. And the very thought of just turning up, putting a fan in and looking for a push at an event without anything else really like blew my mind for a bit. I was like, so just run this by me again. There's definitely a fire in there, and we're putting a fan in. And eventually,
before we've got eyes on it, before we've got somebody next to it with a branch, before we've located there's only one seat, we're just gonna fan it. Yeah.
and like it took me a long time to get me head, not a long time, a couple of days and a couple of wears to get my head around and go, well, actually, do you know what? If we put it in and we get something that we're not expecting, we can just turn it off. It doesn't have to stay there forever. And I was like,
unless you're too proud and people are like, no, I've decided we're doing offensive, and you're like, okay, we're gonna lose the building.
So that really was like the sort of penny dropping moment of this is an incredible tool used correctly. You don't have to rely on it. It's not the go-to. It's not the gold standard. It's just another option. Another.
I think it relies heavily on confident, competent, and assertive BA wearers to quickly, once you've got an established fire and you're happy you know where it is, who rapidly make progress in towards it. Because it does, it clears conditions. It theoretically, therefore, makes your search procedures quicker and more efficient and safer. But you do still have to make progress so we can get to the thing at the quickest possible. You can't, if you're going to switch it, if you're going to put it on and you're still just going to meander through the building very slowly, then that's not going to, if it's fully enclosed, terrible conditions inside, zero visibility, then you're going to go very slowly. But the idea of putting the fan on offensively is it should expedite that next process.
Yeah, 100%. We very trained some crews in offensive, and then this little thing called COVID happened, and it kind of put pay to it. So one of the things that we taught on that was non-negotiables, so things that need to be in place before you can use it offensively. And one of them was a BA team started up with media ready to go before you put the fan in, so that you speed up that process of not having an impact of a fan on a fire without water. Because again, like we said earlier, oxygen makes it bigger in theory. Water makes it smaller. If you've not got water but you've got lots of oxygen, you're just going to continue to make it bigger. So we incorporated that into our teachings. So then kind of came away, but it was a bit of a funny one where I came away and then we were still no longer teaching offensive PPV. So I was like coming back like I'd seen the Ark of the Covenant and saying, this is absolutely amazing, why we're not doing this. And then still we weren't doing it. But what I took away from that was we can still get better at ventilation, just ventilation at its purest form, not using PPV. And a colleague of mine did a degree on PPV use. And I took a lot from him, and I took a lot from his teachings and the way he went about things. And some of it we're probably seen in the eyes of some crews as being a bit radical, because it was quite a way away from what
behind the curtain analogy that we spoke about earlier. Once you've been there and seen it, and it's hard to articulate it, and it's hard to give people that same immersive experience just through your words, because they're still yet to have the eureka moment.
Yeah, absolutely. A bit of time, and it probably takes a bit of confidence, and you know what? It takes a couple of mistakes as well. It takes a couple of getting it wrong, with people not getting injured and the correct safety systems in place. But it takes showing it how it can go wrong, because you need to still respect it. It's a great piece of kit, and it's a fantastic technique, but you still got to have respect for it that it can go wrong if used in the the incorrect way. And sometimes that's even not by any person's
Not a malice. No.
malice. It just sometimes it happens. We
You
work
don't
in an
want to
ever
see it go
changing
wrong. It's just,
environment. Yeah.
yeah.
So it can be just a door slamming shut or anything like that. Could obviously have a bad effect.
But
So
that doesn't
so
mean
yeah.
you throw the
So
baby out with the bathwater. It just means you pivot the current approach. Don't go, ram that. We're never using it again. It's dangerous. You just go, no. We just did the thing slightly wrong. We just didn't. We didn't anticipate that little provision there. Once we make a pivot, once we make an adjustment to the recognized procedure, we'll just go again.
yeah, absolutely. So that for me was where my and kind of knowledge of ventilation, just as itself began to grow a little bit. And I always remember a funny story. We had some Swedish guys come over, some Swedish firefighters, and they stayed with us at our training centre for about a fortnight. And obviously, the Scandinavians kind of invented the 3D fog attack, which prior to tactical ventilation was seen as the ultimate way of fighting fire, which was minimal amount of water to sort of slow the fire down.
We've had a couple of the authors on the podcast. Yeah, really, fellas.
And we had these two Swedish guys come over, and me and one of my colleagues like, right, we're going to make a really big fire, and you're going to show us this 3D fog attack thing that you talk about. They're like, we're doing it, but we don't think we're doing it as good as you, because you guys say it's absolutely amazing. Yeah. So we went and sat in this compartment at our training centre, and we got a fire going, and it was one of the ways you started thinking, it's a bit keen in here. And we gave the branch to the Swedish guy, and me and my colleague sat there like going, come on then, show us, show us this amazing thing. And basically one of them shuffled to the door, opened it, and he just blasted the branch on it and basically just ventilated it. And I was like, there you go then. And we came out and they were like, well, why would you mess about and sort of gas cooling something that you don't need to, where you could just put it out? And I was like, okay. And it just showed the evolution from where 3D fog attack, certainly when I joined in 2007, was the go-to firefighting technique pretty much for everything. Yeah. Gas cooling was like everything. Whereas
just continue to gas cool. I go, okay, at some point we need to fight the fire as well. Why continue to improve conditions if you could just put it out and then move on? If there's no casualty centered rescue that needs to take place, if you just want to make a quick, make the conditions better, get somebody out of there, you're not going to have time to do an extinguishment and ventilation. But if you're just in there firefighting, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, and it's the other thing in it of like I talk when I used to teach fire behaviour courses to crews, and you say, so right, let's just imagine then we've got a big fire in corner room and we're going to sit here and we're going to gas cool. Like, when are we going to extinguish the fire via gas cooling? And they'll all go, not sure, blah, blah, blah. And you say, the reality of it is to run out of fuel, because the fire is continuing to create the conditions, and all you're doing is you're cooling the conditions, but you're not. It's like, have you heard?
You're managing the lag effect of the thing, but you're not going to the thing.
Have you heard the combine harvester analogy? This is a great one. So you've got a combine harvester in a cornfield, cutting the corn, and you've got a child missing in the cornfield. Do you A, search for the child, or B, turn off the combine harvester, then search for the child? And that for me was like eureka, like
100%.
Making conditions better, and if we open this and we do that, and the reality of it is, if we put the fire out, it'll stop creating smoke, stop creating the bad conditions, then we can do it. Obviously, we know that that's a simplistic view, and in reality, you're not going to do it like that. You're going to do a dual approach where you're going to have crews searching for casualties, and you're going to have somebody to aggressively fight the fire. But ultimately, get the fire out.
Questions on incident command courses, though, when they go, fire, 2 persons are accounted for, fire in the back bedroom, what's the priority? And the whole room kind of goes silent, because some people daren't go put the fire out. Other people go, oh, and then you just pose the question to them, but you're like, but aren't we here to search and rescue? We're here to rescue life. We don't care about the building, remember? Life's the first priority. And they're like, okay, search for life. And you're like, but you're not going to put the fire out then? Because, if you put the fire out, then any survivability is going to increase. And you just pose that wicked question to them.
Yeah, and the other one I always remember from Fire Behaviour courses one, and he was actually an old watch manager of mine when I was a recruit. So I think he used to come to try and test me. And we were discussing about firefighting, and he was like, well, why would you not leave the fire lit to help you look for the casualties? Now, that sounds utterly ridiculous to me and yourself. But there used to be a train of thought that was the way to do it back in the sort of 70s and 80s. But we both
room, have a look around. Before we had thermal imaging cameras, that was why they did it back then. Because they were like, use the light of the fire, take a good scan of the room. Can I see anything? Number 2 will point it out, and then attack the fire. Because as soon as you do that, it's all going to go black anyway.
Yeah. So we had this debate, and he was like, "No, I'll leave it lit." And I go, "Right, okay, Eric, let's use a different analogy then." I says, "Okay, so we got a room full of acetylene. Are you going to take a candle in to search for a casualty? Oh, no, absolutely not, because it's dangerous and it'll explode. And, acetylene is really flammable. And he said, well, what's carbon monoxide's flammable range? And you put them on the board and you're like, it's very, very similar. So are we going to leave the fire lit, or actually are we going to put the massive hazard out and then search for the casualty? And then, you talk about the evolution. You then chuck in tac vent on top of aggressively fighting the fire, or you chuck in just ventilation, just natural ventilation. And suddenly you've evolved firefighting tactics to a degree. And essentially in our training department, led by the guy who did the degree, I'll be honest, I can't really take much
No.
much credit.
Mate,
much
we're all
credit
standing on the shoulders of giants. You and I learned this from somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. And basically he started it, and we integrated it into recruits courses sort of 7-8 years ago, like more aggressive ventilation, more use of ventilation. And since then it has evolved the sort of wider impact operationally, and then it got involved in BA courses and things like that. And then fast forward years later, I got some temporary promotion into our Grenfell team, and one of my first tasks was to roll out the smoke curtains.
Yeah.
And so I rolled out our services smoke curtains. I didn't buy them, and I didn't write the business plan before anybody who did is listening to this and claims I'm nicking credit. But so I rolled them out, which involved obviously the training and such like. And I remember not resistance to them, but there was definitely an ounce of sort of skepticism to you're talking about hanging essentially a fly net over a door. Like, what you're talking about? And it was a bit of a difficult one to kind of guide it, that it's not just high rise specific, it's specific to any incident.
This episode will come out now after, because we haven't released Dr. Reich's yet, but yours will come after it. And it's when he then goes into the depths of bidirectional flow paths that people can understand the principles of how it would be useful in any situation, not just high rise to protect the stairwell or whatever. It's about it's multiple applications and benefits.
Yeah, 100%. And I've got a video that I used to show on our Grenfell course. I say Grenfell course, it was fires in tall buildings course, but we obviously tagline it with Grenfell every time. But it was a French video, and it showed two scenarios, the same room, one with a smoke curtain, one without a smoke curtain, and basically it was trying to show the protection of the stairwell element. But I used to pause it before it used to show the stairwell, and it used to purely just talk about fire behaviour, compartment firefighting, your two up, two down, general house fires that we get, and said, this is the benefit of this piece of kit, regardless of protecting the stairwell. And then he used to carry on and said, now look at the protection of the stairwell as well. And now I think we've got to a point in our organisation where they're more readily used than what they were when they first came out. And I've almost become like the smoke curtain guy to a degree, where I now get WhatsApp messages from watch managers and crew managers saying, we've used a smoke curtain and look how fantastic it were. I'm kind of like, I can't really claim responsibility for it, but they're a fantastic piece of kit.
You've got to have those local champions to champion the thing, because and this is kind of the whole point of the podcast. So many people will never speak to the inventor of the smoke curtain, and they won't hear the logical thought process that he went through to get to the eventual creation of what is now the smoke curtain. And hundreds of thousands of people have purchased it all over the world, and there's different variations of it and all that sort of stuff. But if you just give people the thing and they don't understand the why behind the thing, though sometimes people think, oh, he's just trying to make a name for himself. Like for yourself, I'm like, oh, he's a new station manager and he's trying to claim this new thing is God's gift to firefighting. Well, no, he's probably just spent a bit more time understanding the why behind it. That's why he's so excited about it, or she. But if they don't have somebody championing it, and you've got to have those local champions. I always think of them as cultural architects. Do you know what I mean? Where you've got to have those touch points across all different organizations that get it, that get the thing. Yeah. Otherwise, you could forgive them for not buying into it because they don't understand the purpose.
Yeah, 100%. So obviously we rolled them out, and again, it just shows the evolution that we've had over the period of time with sort of my colleague who did the degree, and it becomes sort of like a multi-pronged attack on just improving standards. And we've still got some way to go, definitely. And I think in the future we probably will see the implementation of phase-free PPV, which would then obviously add a different element to it. But I feel like we're in a better position now compared to when I did my instructor course in understanding ventilation as an entity, as opposed to just sort of not understanding it really and bringing the fans in. It almost felt like we had to go through that journey, if you like, to new techniques, different ways of doing things, to to now, okay, we're probably in a position where we can now start incorporating fans into it as well.
It also makes me think, echoing back to the lithium ion conversation, like now that we've got a lot of fans out there that are powered by electric, and the fact that they've got these big lithium ion things on them means that they're a lot lighter. They're not obviously kicking out all the fuel that a petrol driven fan is. So you can take it up onto the third, fourth, fifth floor. Putting a fan into the bottom of a stairwell of a 20-story building is going to make very little difference on the seventh floor if it's not a positively pressurized system and it hasn't had that infrastructure placed in the building when it was constructed. But now we've got something we can actually transport and take to different locations and start to be very tactical about the way we're applying ventilation. That is another evolution, because that used to be another question we posed where, okay, you're going to bring that fan in and use it here, are you? Okay, so you're going to bring all those fumes and all those additional toxins and that aerospirable atmosphere, and you're going to put that fan in an enclosed environment and switch it on. Well, actually, now you've also got rid of that factor, so you can be more flexible in your approach to using these things.
Yeah, 100%. And again, that played into sort of the Grenfell work I went on to do after leaving training centre. All of this sort of became basically my daily life. If I'm honest, I became enormously invested in how our brigade, how our service would interpret the recommendations from the Grenfell inquiry and how we would sort of do it. And it was part of like a little team where it was essentially our day job. So, rolling smoke curtains out and things like that.
So take us to that sort of next chapter of your career, because we've covered little aspects of Grenfell. We won't go into too much of the detail of it, but there was an implementation plan of the Grenfell Tower inquiry. It came out of the phase 1 recommendations, I think it was. And I pulled up there's a 38-page document that they go into different aspects, and we won't bore people with the whole contents of it. But effectively, obviously, the Grenfell Tower was an appalling tragedy for Londoners, but also had ripple effects across the whole of the UK Fire and Rescue Service, not just in the Fire and Rescue Service, but how we approach incidents and construction. 72 people lost their lives in the fire, and a lot of the context behind it was that it never should have spread and gotten to the scale that it was at. But we owe it to the people that lost their lives, and obviously the firefighters that worked diligently and hard for so long to try and make the differences. But as with all the debriefs that we do, we'd be remiss if we didn't try and take on board some of the learnings and the recommendations from it. So I think there was so the first phase report was 46 recommendations.
Yeah.
And I think it was 29 went to LFB itself. But with those, give people some context around what actually filtered out to some of the wider services. So was it that whole 46 recommendations that everyone was asked to work on, or how many went out to all the fire services?
So within our service, I can only really talk about our service, to be honest.
Yeah.
I did have dealings with other services around us, but the Grenfell recommendations had been out for some time before we got put in post, if that made sense. So certain things had already begun to happen, but not at a pace that I think our service felt comfortable about. So they sort of brought a team in to sort of push this forward a little bit, and we were part of that team.
Some people just give them a polite nod, don't they? And then you can find 6 years down the line, nothing's really been done.
Yeah, exactly. And I think if I'm being honest, we were probably in a danger of beginning to do that. We kind of scratched the surface, and I think that when sort of our
senior work, it needs people, resources, and these people have already got jobs. So when these get loaded onto services, it's like, okay, who's going to do that?
Yeah. So the starting point for me, really personally, was it became a job advert. To be honest, I'd since passed the watch manager process, and I'd expressed some interest in watch manager posts on station. But due to the fact that I was skilled up to the gills, and that nobody really wanted to come into the training department, the chance of me getting out was
that's the thing, isn't it? You get painted into a corner
a little bit. I saw the job advert and I thought, do you know what? Potentially in the future being a station manager, but in all honesty, this gets me out of training centre potentially. And the Grenfell thing had interested me, as in, like, I've always had a little bit of an analytical mind to look at post incidents and think, how would I do things differently, or would I do things differently? What were the mistakes?
And that's not a blame game. It's not us saying that the people were crap, but a healthy, I always say a healthy red team or a healthy debrief team needs to look at it non-emotionally and go, you know what? I think that was wrong. And you say, you're saying all the firefighters died for no reason, or they were just stupid. No one's saying that. We'd have probably done the same thing at the same time in the same place. But with the beauty of hindsight, connecting the dots, looking backwards, actually, maybe we should have done something different.
Yeah. So I expressed an interest. I think due to my training background, that held me in a good standing to potentially get it. Got it, temporary station manager, and then joined a small team that at the time was just myself and an area manager who were kind of picking it up and running with it. It had a lot of elements to it, so sort of an ops element, business fire safety element, probably called different things in different brigades, but they're basically the team that do the inspections around businesses, and
That's exploded across the UK. Yeah, there's so many people. Grey and Green Book staff have been employed to do fire protection roles specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. And we ran something called the Building Risk Review Team, which basically went round and inspected every single one of our brigade areas, high rise. So you can imagine that was a massive, massive.
Did you have to
job,
do all your level 4, level 5 FP stuff as well for that?
So what we did is we took already qualified fire inspectors out of business fire safety and created this elite crack team. And basically, they had the skills, they had the experience, and they went and did it on the service's behalf.
Yeah, find the worst offenders and try and get that low-hanging fruit straight away, because there's some terrible stuff out there that we've just not had resources to go and inspect.
So really, in a way, it helped us to highlight them potential offenders so that we could put control measures in place to keep residents safe in the short term until they got the issues resolved, or until we came up with solutions to how we would deal with that building.
Could we go there for a second, and feel free, we can take this out if like you're not happy to speak on value with it, but like for business owners and also just for general firefighters awareness, when they go to places and they think this doesn't quite look right, when somebody from an inspectorate capacity does go, whether it's a fire protection officer, whether it's a fire inspector or whatever it might be, just let people know what those provisions are, because we can bring it into a legal framework and actually put sanctions on those buildings or force them to close business or whatever it is. What are the kind of levels? And I mean, I know you can only speak perhaps from your service, but I imagine there's a very similar aspect in most services. What are those kind of levels that you can impose on businesses or buildings?
Yeah, so obviously I don't have massive intimate knowledge. It's just from me time in our team. But say our business safety teams have got legal powers to put prohibition notices on buildings.
Yeah,
I think in the interim, dependent on the level of risk, I think in the interim it would be much like a development plan, where it's like a bit of a chat saying you need to get this sorted, and this is the time we're going to give you to get it sorted, and you need to put control measures in place to keep your residents safe in that period of time. And
we're going to plaster it with smoke alarms is step one. We're going to get them to fix their doors. We're going to get them to move a load of stuff, amend some escape plans, all that sort of jazz.
Yeah, that type of thing. So again, like going back to the sort of low hanging fruit, and then the sliding scale then goes all the way up to sort of enforcement notices, to court cases, to prohibition orders, to things like that. I mean, I vividly remember being in the Grenfell team and getting a phone call on Friday night from the chief fire officer, and I was literally sat at home, and the phone rang, and I thought, this probably isn't good. So as I answered the phone, and the chief was like, just to let you know, we've basically put a prohibition order on a building, a high-rise building, and the chief was ringing me to give me some awareness of it, because it actually is in my area where I live.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, oh, all right, okay. And then that's an example, sort of the far end of sort of prohibitions and legal enforcement to change things, stop things, and all that type of stuff. And I've got to say that the business fire safety teams who I work with, and on a not a daily basis, but intermittently jumped in with, they get through a monumental amount of work, and they're the pressure that them guys are under at times, because they're suddenly stepping out of a fire protection element and they're into like a legal arena.
And you can get that wrong
witness
so easily.
Statements and and things like that. I remember at times thinking, I'm really glad I don't have to do that, because that seems really.
As a knuckle dragging firefighter, we've never had the development. We've never had the exposure and experience in how to operate competently in a legal framework, and cross all the T's and dot the I's and all that jazz. Yeah,
absolutely. And them guys, the amount of work they got through with the building risk review team, and the commitment they gave to it was phenomenal, to be fair. So there was that element to it, and then there was a really big control element to it as well, obviously from actions from control. So I worked with the watch manager, who was the training lead for control, and in all honesty, control in our service had already done lots and lots of work. But where it's kind of interesting and different is that every control room is slightly different, slightly bigger, slightly smaller. Slightly different staffing numbers, slightly different equipment, slightly different technology, slightly different procedures. So with the Grenfell stuff, it weren't a case of being able to pick it up in its entirety and basically just dump it in your service and say, we'll do this. It had to be quite bespoke to the
Yeah,
service. And again, our control had done lots and lots of work, but it was like, it was me and I mean, it was a massive crash course for me because literally control to me had just turned me out to jobs for years. And suddenly I'm
yeah,
sat in control, seeing how they work, seeing the issues that they have, you know, and like, again, I've got so
really
much
hard because they haven't got
respect.
the liberty of learning after the fact. They have literally got to have all the up-to-date information all the time
Yeah.
because they are the pulse, they are the beating heart of most organizations. Because when it is 1 a.m. and a brand new crew manager is acting up at wherever, they're going to ring control and go, what do I do about this? And they've got
Yeah.
to be able to pull that document up straight in front of them and say, this is the latest, this is what we do.
So again, like from my time in the Grenfell team, that I got to see these other areas, and I got to kind of see the bigger juggernaut that is a service and how it functions. And yeah, my time in control, I've got nothing but absolute respect for anybody who works in a control room
Yeah, they're
because
incredible.
I've been sat in there before, and like they've had a few jobs and they're very busy. And like one of the ladies just went around and said, Dev, do you fancy putting an headset on? I was like, absolutely not. No, send me to anything. I do not want to get involved in that. That sounds
Yeah.
horrendous.
But you're right,
So the
like they
guys,
all need to have some similar ways of working because the Grenfell was a typical example where all of the fire survival guidance was just too much even for LFB to cope with, and they punched it out to lots of different control centers up and down the UK to help support that sort of resiliency in the system. And I think that shone a light on all of the different variations of ways that we handle fire survival guidance and how we record it and get it fed back into the system to give the incident commander on the ground that holistic view of their priorities and where people are and what's the best actions to take and who still needs rescuing and all that sort of jazz. So that shone another light on the fact that we need to all work a little bit closely together for that cross regional working to make sure we are giving the same product to the end user, to the communities.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and I think what also kind of helped a little bit with the Grenfell stuff is I went in and spent some time in control explaining what we do from an operational point of view.
Mm.
Because I think sometimes the guys and girls in control are not fully understanding of what we do at operation. So when I ran the Grenfell training courses, or the fires in tall buildings courses that we invented, we invited control into every one of them. We brought control
Good
operatives
shout.
with us.
Good
We
shout.
made them into casualties. We had them being rescued from flats, and we basically showed them that this is what we're faced with in the first 10 minutes of potentially an incident.
Yeah.
And again, like all the lads and lasses came away and said, "Thanks for that. I got so much from it and a better understanding." And even
Yeah.
today, I've continued to kind of work a bit with control on other incidents,
Yeah.
wildfires and stuff like that, to give them an understanding of what we're dealing with out there.
Because they're trying to do the best they can with what they got, and the people on the ground are doing the same. But
Yeah,
there's that void in the middle where what I'm saying isn't making sense to you, or what you're asking me to do isn't possible, and I just simply don't have time. Or the reason I'm ignoring you is because of this. It's not out of malice or a disinterest in the value that the control can add to an incident ground. It's just the logistics, and perhaps they can't see the fuller picture of what's there, and that happens from both
yeah.
sides.
Yeah, and it's just different priorities, isn't it? At the
Yeah,
time, their priorities are to get the resources there, get as much information as they can, delegate that to the resources, make sure they're structurally in a position where they can deal with the incident, looking at the wider aspects. And then on the fire ground, we're very much on the get the water on the fire, get the resources here, and like the priorities are different.
yeah,
So the Grenfell stuff, and then really largely we then had a lot of work around policies, procedures, training for the crews. And I'll be honest, it became a bit of a labour of love because
mm.
we took the recommendations and we looked at what we needed to get from the recommendations, and then we looked at the complexity of our station area with the size of our high rise and all this type of stuff, and then there was obviously an element of a trade union challenge to a service around their procedures, and
Yeah.
it really started to like make it quite complex. And
Yeah. That can
I used to
sometimes hurt when you think you're at the getting close to the end of a solution and you haven't considered the impact on the trade unions. And then they can just, with the greatest of intentions, they just slam a halt on it. And you're like, damn, I hadn't consulted with the right people.
So ultimately, for us, coming in a little bit later to do it was a good thing because we'd kind of seen these things happen elsewhere.
Yeah,
So when I came in to our team, I kind of went on a watching brief for about
yeah.
3 weeks where I just got the lay of the land everywhere else and
Great
seen some
shout.
of the issues that people had and some of the things that people had implemented but maybe weren't too happy about them and things need to change and stuff. And I'll be honest, it was an ever-changing landscape. It was literally changing by the week of different procedures, different policies, different equipment, that type of thing. And we got to a point where sort of before Christmas, about 2 years ago, probably coming up this Christmas, where we then have to just stick a sort of flag in the sand and say, right, this is what we're doing. This is what, as our organisation, this is what we're doing. And I, along with the watch manager now in our department and obviously the area manager, we designed how we thought it could work, bespoke to our station area, within the limitations of what we could provide, within the limitations of our technology, within the limitations of kit and all that type of stuff. And I basically came up with this training package, with this way of evacuating a high-rise residential building that's involved in fire. And
no different to an instant ground, is it? Past a certain point, more information isn't going to be helpful. You just need to make a decision now. You can't continue to wait. Oh, I think I'll wait till that resource gets here, or I'll wait till that next policy changes, or I'll wait till we purchase that next bit of equipment. Okay, but make a decision. What are we doing today? Because there's crews attending things right now, and they need some guidance. They need some information. What are we supposed to do?
yeah, absolutely. And I looked at incidents that had happened worldwide. I looked at an incident that happened in Milan that was seen as a bit of a success, where nobody had been injured, but they'd had a very, very substantial cladding fire that had engulfed the entire building. But they got away. Yeah, they got away with sort of 3 or 4 people with smoke inhalation, but that was it. I looked at that. Almost forensically.
There's cultural aspects of that as well, isn't there? Because certain places around the world, they are just much better at following orders. Some places in the UK, you can tell them everything. You can set the sirens off. You can do phased evacuation, whatever. But some community members just don't listen, which really hurts.
Yeah, you've always got to deal with the human element of everything as well. So basically, I came up with a way of working. I'm not going to sit here and say that it's the best. I'm not going to sit here and say it's the worst. There'll be people who might listen to this in a similar position to me and say that's utterly ridiculous. And I've had them discussions with people from other services.
It wouldn't work for them.
Exactly, and that's the thing. And I said what we've got to remember is it's bespoke to South York, to the brigade that I serve. It's bespoke to our. It's bespoke to our sort of demographic in terms of residential buildings that we've got. And I'll be honest, the crux of it is basically the early implementation of an evacuation based on some triggers that are set out in National Occupational Guidance, and creating a structure around that to facilitate an evacuation early in the incident. So not at a point where we've got potentially a fire that's out of control and then we try and start evacuate. Yes. It was very much around 3 principles. It was identify that there's a need to evacuate, the stairwell and any escape routes, facilitate the evacuation, while as well as a 4th point, having some firefighting actions, some firefighting tactics to either limit fire spread or at least to try and get on top of it while we facilitated the evacuation. Now, that is in its absolute simplistic view, and there's obviously lots and lots and lots of reasons as to why that might not work. However, what I felt, and I still feel to this day, is the more simply you can keep it when it comes to the day of the races, there's more chance of it succeeding. So we very much had marking flats with yellow chalk that are empty, so that we know that they're empty, and ultimately getting to a point where, just like any other house fire, the first time we know that all persons are accounted for is when we know that every room's empty. And having to work towards getting to that point in a high rise, which again has its complexities. It has a massive smash on resources. So basically, we created that. We ran it, trialed a few times, and we tweaked it here and there. And then we put quite a comprehensive package along together around external fire spread, building construction, use of lifts, and things like that. And we kind of tried to knit it together as the sort of bigger package, while also tweaking our current procedures for just your generic bog standard fires in high-rise buildings. So we implemented high-rise packs. We brought in smoke curtains. We brought in smoke hoods. We brought in, a bit of an evolution in training in the way that where we're getting water from. What pros and cons do we have of running water from the floor below? The pro is that you're plugging in clean air. You're going from a place of safety. The con is we're also now compromising 3 and 4 doors to get to the fire compartment. that potentially when we open the fire compartments, then going to filtrate smoke through. So how can we stop that? Well, we can use smoke curtains,
That is the big
if,
thing. Yeah.
or in a place of safety, we can run our hose from the fire floor if the situation, is suitable. And what we tried to create was a policy that gave guidance, but also allowed for flexibility within it, dependent on the situation in which they're seeing, rather than me standing in front of a lesson discussing a council block that's straight up in air and it's got 2 stairwells and we can do this and we can do that. Yeah. The reality of it is now with modern architecture, there's not many buildings in that high rise that look like that. So it was about creating a policy and a way of working that allowed crews to have flexibility within it to implement it how they see fit. So one of the criticisms I got on some of the courses was, well, Dev, this is a bit woolly. And I was like, yeah, on purpose. It's designed to be woolly. This is the skeleton. You build the meat on it how you want.
These
the
are the overarching strategies.
Element. Yeah. You put the meat on. You're comfortable from a professional point of view that's working. It's over to you.
The more prescriptive you get, the more limited its application as well, because people will end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater because it doesn't fit on the building that they've been presented to, and they may disregard all of it. Whereas if you make it woollier, as your description there, or you make a more of a skeleton for it, they can then adapt it, different pieces of meat, different applications, like you say.
Absolutely, and that's ultimately what we created, and what we rolled out. And as I said at the beginning, is it the best? Probably not. Is it the worst? Probably not. Is it the best of what we could do based upon our service? And I think it is, and I'm willing to have the debate with anybody around that.
And you've also got to be brave enough to, like you said, just stick your stake in the ground, stick your flag in the ground and say, this is where we are. And then take that feedback. This is not something that we're going to write in stone that's going to not change and evolve over the next 30 years, because everything's always changing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was what I kind of wanted to put in there, that things change and tactics change and there's flexibility within it to change things. So, for example, we use paper and pen, if I'm honest, as a bit of an evacuation log of where people were and who needed rescuing. There's an absolute expectation that will evolve into technology. But by starting it with paper and pen, if the technology fails us in the future, we can fall back to paper and pen. Whereas if you go to technology straight away and it fails you, people lose confidence in it and don't use it.
Yes.
So if you use pen and piece of paper to start with, then you've got a way to go forward and a way to come backwards. If you don't, then you haven't. So yeah, and like I said, as you can probably tell, I'm quite passionate about it because it became part of my life. I was like waking at 3 in the morning thinking, stairwell protection, how can I do that? That type, like 3 in the morning, laid there in dark and like having to lean over with a bit of paper, scribble a few things down and go, right, I'll think about that tomorrow. And then I'd go charging into work to sort the area manager. So I'd come up with this great idea and I'd sit down with her and she'd go, yeah, but have you thought about this? And I go, probably not. I'll go away and think about that again. And then I'd go away and have another think. But yeah, it was absolutely a fantastic part of my career, but incredibly hardworking and sobering as well, if I'm honest, because I forensically went through the Grenfell inquiry. I think I listened to every session over a period of time, and utterly horrendous incident for everybody involved. A real massive tragedy, but something that we have to learn from as a sector. And I think that
it's important that people do listen to those things, whether they go to the Gov websites or YouTube and see the outtakes, or if they have the stomach to immerse themselves in some of the painful conversations that we saw happen to, obviously the watch manager immediately involved, all of the subject matter experts that came in to criticize, to shine light on. You've got to imagine how difficult it was for that individual, for that first person on scene. And if you can put yourself into their shoes and at least glean some, and you can say, oh, that's never going to happen again. Well, okay, but let's assume that something like it may happen, because people aren't perfect. Mistakes are made all the time, both in the construction of the building, the amount of information that people take on board when they begin to, accommodate these buildings and they begin to live there. So if we can glean the lessons from it, I forget, it was Winston Churchill's, I think it was, said that, if you're not willing to learn from your mistakes, you're doomed to repeat them. And that's the best articulation of anything that we do in the emergency services. We've got to be willing to front up to them and face those difficult conversations and hopefully learn.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. There's another saying as well that I particularly like, that It's a military type saying that no plan survives contact. So you can have the best plan in the world, but when the bullets start flying, things change. So you've
Nice,
got to
one,
have
isn't it?
something to kind of fall back. Yeah, it's a good one. It's pretty
Have a plan
sobering, but
until
it's
everyone gets punched in the face, and then
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
take me before we close, because I want to be super respectful of your time. We spoke for like an hour and a half already. I absolutely love that, mate. I love how conversations can just flare. But that is again the whole purpose of the podcast, because it shines on the passion that lives within the sector. And with the greatest respect, I don't think you're remotely unique. There's incredibly passionate people all across the sectors, certainly in the fire and rescue service. And if we can just open up that can for a little bit and let that excitement and passion flood out, it's amazing the rabbit holes we can go down. But I wanted to talk before we close about some of the issues we faced last year with the hot summer that we had, because I know in and around your area and around those services, but also across the UK, it speaks again about our familiarization or lack thereof with some of the wildfires that we experienced last year and the resulting effects of PPE that got purchased and different tactics. And I wonder if you could glean for a second, because I don't think we've finished the circle yet, from a UK perspective of how we've adapted to some of those challenges. But I know you had a few experiences yourself, the good, the bad, and the ugly in some jobs and some incidents, and how they sort of materialized.
Yeah, so I left the Grenfell team and got given I got given two stations in our obviously services patch, and obviously the summer came around and we had that very very prolonged period of hot weather, and we had we started to get more widespread sort of grass fires and things like that, and then the 2 days in question, the Monday when obviously it kind of started, I were on duty and we'd had a busy week as a service, and I was super mindful of my crews had been very busy in our sort of patch, and I'd come in the morning, the pump were already out. I'd opened my office up, got my main scheme radio on my desk, just listening to sort of the messages from the fireground, sort of out and about, and it was a busy time. There's a lot of pumps out, and my particular station had gone out to a job out of our station area to back up another crew. And they were on the way back, and I'd just gone in the kitchen to make a cup of tea, and I looked out the window and saw an enormous plume of smoke, and I thought, oh dear. And then I heard the message from control to the crew, basically turning them to the job. And I thought, that's a pretty big job, that. So I rang the OIC and said, look, I'm conscious that you've been to a job already. You've not really seen the station this morning. Have you got enough water? Have you got enough sun cream? Have you got enough, that type of thing? If not, I'll come out. So he said, yeah, we've rattled through the water. We could do some water and stuff. And I says, right, I'll come out. So jumps in my car, fills the boot full of water, suntan lotion, some snacks that I managed to grab from the local shop. I think I grabbed some Lucasade and stuff like that, and shot out to the job. And I didn't know where the sort of RVP was. It had not been designated, so I just headed for the nearest sort of road. Thought they'll have headed in that way. Pulled on the street, and there's like a lot of people, and it's quite smoky and stuff, and there's people with hose pipes and stuff, and I thought, So as I come spin my car around, I could see a bit of fire creeping towards these houses, and I thought, okay, that's not so great. Spun round, found the guys on top of an old pit top that had been turned into a bit of a wildlife sort of reserve, and I drove up onto the pit top, saw the OIC, and I said, look, I'm obviously not in charge, I'm not staying, because it starts to create a bit of a conflict. I'm not allocated to the job. Here's your water, here's some Lucasade, but just be aware, I've just been up onto that road there, and the fire's beginning to creep in there, so just be careful, kind of thing. Jumps back in my car, drives back to station, gets on station, here's a radio message, priority message, mate pumps 5. Thought, okay. And then a couple of minutes later, priority message, mate pump 7. I thought, oh dear. And then my phone started vibrating. It was one of the other station managers saying, you'll be on your way to this shortly. And I was like, possibly. So I'm kind of sat there waiting for the call, and I chucked up Google Maps, sort of trying to preempt it a little bit, and had a little look and thought, right, got any other different access areas and all that type of thing. And then I got there was another priority message, mate pumps 10, confirmed wildfire, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a bit different. Never been to a wildfire. This is going to be a first. So got turned out as commander, I think, or it might have been ops commander. I think they sent a group manager as incident commander. So rang the group manager who was on his way. He'd been my boss in training centre, and just said, look, Gaffer, I'm on my way. I'm more than likely going to be here in front of you because you're coming from further afield. There's a strong chance by the time you get here, I'll have already took over. because of the complexity and scale of the incident. So I drove back onto the street where I'd come from, and already we had some pumps on that street, and the watch manager had taken over and was on that street location. So he took over there. I think he had 5 pumps there, and then we had pumps rolling from all over the county. So I got there, got a bit of a quick brief off him, which was difficult because the scale of the area was enormous. So to get a real
Speak about wrapping your hands around something when it's a wildfire, almost impossible. You feel like you're chasing your tail all the time.
So got a bit of an idea of a brief of him, and I said, look, I will be taking over, but I'm not taking over right now because I need to go up onto the top and have a look with what we're actually dealing with, because from where I am now, I can't see it. So talking about PPE, white t-shirt, fire leggings, parks my car up, do a bit of security fence, and sets off in the general direction of where I'd left my pumps before. Got up there and got a couple of pumps, and they were, making a real good stab of trying to put the fire out. But by this point, they'd been there a good couple of hours, so they were absolutely on chin strapped kind of thing. So I said, right, I'm going to take over. I'm going to go back down and have a chat with the previous incident commander, and we're going to come up with a bit of plan. I says, right, my first plan at the minute is I need to put a bit of structure in place so they're all singing off the same song sheet, because at the minute we're a bit fragmented, we're a bit all over the place. So let's just get a bit of structure and then we'll take it from there. So I had a bit of a battle on my hands getting a bit of a structure in place. We got a bit of structure in place, then the group manager turned up. And
that can take time in itself. By the time you've done that, things have changed.
And the problem were as well, the radios were absolutely backlogged with need more pressure, I need this over here, this is going here, blah, 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 blah. So I were having to walk to the incident commander to get him to say, right, I'm taking over. Don't send any more messages. I'm taking over. This is what I want you to do in this sector. I'm going to go over there, and that's going to be that sector. And this is what I want them to do in that sector. You happy with your brief? Yeah. Put myself, make sure you keep on top of your welfare, keep people out of someone you need, make sure they've got PPE on, that type of thing. Right. If you need me, ring me mobile, because you'll not get through on radio. So stomps back over, gives a similar brief to the side. Anyway, to cut the story kind of short, we managed to keep it on the pit top. We managed to keep it out the houses. And I take absolutely no praise or responsibility for that. The guys and girls absolutely grafted to keep on top of it. And then so that was the end of that day. And I kind of stumped home at about 7 o'clock. I walked into the house and my missus went, what have you come as? Like, she went, you're not, why do you look like that? You're meant to be in charge. And I was like, I know. And
we can stop doing all this.
Yeah, I was covered in I was just literally like everybody that day, just absolutely minging. And I remember climbing into bed and thinking, it can't be like this tomorrow. Like that's just ridiculous. And then the next day I'd been asked to go into a TCG for our group manager, tactical coordinator group, with our local council to just discuss some of the issues that we were facing as a district.
Because then you have to start dragging in all the local resilience forums and all that sort of stuff, because it has such wider effects, doesn't it, these things?
Yeah, so I'd been in the meeting and it come to me as fire and it said, what's your concerns, Dev, for today? And I was like, well, in all honesty, the biggest concerns we've got is open water swimming. It's extremely warm. Kids are off school. There's a concern that we might start getting people swimming in expanses of water. So I said, so from our point of view, we'd appreciate patrols around open water sites, trying to keep people out of the water, messages out on social media and things like that. And as a caveat, I said, and also we had a pretty wide scale wildfire yesterday. So, we've also got that on our radar kind of thing. And I logged off the Zoom TCG from my office and I thought, right, okay, and straight away my phone rang. And then they describe it as absolute carnage. Like there was a time when I was sat in my car at a job and every single area I looked across the horizon, smoke everywhere. And in 17 years in the job, nearly, I've only ever heard probably 3 or 4 priority messages that, you can tell they sound panicked. Priority message, I need. And I think that day alone, I think I heard 9, 10. That day on itself, I declared personally 2 wildfires.
We had major incidents declared across a couple of services around us, and that's real twitchy bum time, because just because this thing's happening doesn't mean nobody's crashing their car, doesn't mean nobody's not stuck in wherever. Yeah,
so what ended up happening was we got pumps at incidents all over. So they started sending station managers and group managers out to incidents to kind of assess them. Do they need an attendance of an appliance, or can we actually leave this one? And I got sent to one, and I drove out there quite a distance. Drove out there, got there, and found a fire running down an edge line at the side of a road. And I was like, oh, pretty steady. Like I can deal with this. So obviously the locals are out, and I'm like, can anybody give me some water? Like any form of water?
Yeah.
And this guy's like, I've got some gallon drums. I said, all right, can you fill one up? And sort of my plan was to let it run down the edge row. And when he got to a gate entrance, to sort of damp down everything beyond the gate entrance and put like a bit of a fire break in.
Yeah.
So I drove down to this guy's barn, filled a gallon drum up, chucked it in my car, put a seatbelt on it, drove back to the scene.
And he's
and by
thinking,
the time I got,
is this what I pay my taxpayers money for?
yeah. And by the time I drove back,
sense.
the fire jumped the road and was in a wood line and basically vanishing towards a extremely expensive barn conversion.
Love it.
So I declared a wildfire, got a phone call from an SM who was working in control saying, Dev, you're not getting anybody. Do you really need somebody? And I'm like, yes, I really need somebody. And they're like, we can't give you anybody. There is nothing. I'm like, okay, sound.
Okay. Make farmers barrels 2, hose pipes 1.
I quickly realised that my gallon drum weren't going to do anything. And then just by sheer luck through the smoke, saw a fire engine. So I commandeered it, literally like, right, whatever you're doing, I'm not interested. Get down here.
Yeah.
Got some hose reels off. We managed to stop it going towards the barn conversion and divert it into the wood. And we were actually there for about 3 weeks after in the wood line, but it stopped it going to someone's house. Like the pure scale of that day was just, and I know it's like a bit of a buzzword, but totally unprecedented. I don't think anybody really expected it to be on the level it were. And I think we declared a major incident about 4 o'clock, and SMs and stuff, we were still out at jobs till 10, 11, 12 o'clock. There were some great stories of 2 SMs on the local motorway network putting out a car fire with 2 dry powder extinguishers and a crate of water that they'd managed to get together. So like, yeah, some amazing stories out of some really, really like tragic.
Well, that stuff like that doesn't mean it's never going to happen again. And then you look at all the money we've had to spend on like the Grenfells and the fire protection teams that we were speaking about earlier. And now somebody goes, right, we need to get X. We need to go and buy all these wildfire PPE, and we need to go and invest in this. And we're like, people forget it's not a bottomless pot of money. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that's why then we've just had all the pay rises and all that sort of stuff. And you do have to sympathise. I know it's hard to try and sympathise with senior leadership teams, but these are some really, really tricky problems. And none of them are unwarranted requests for equipment and resource, and it's tough.
Yeah. So as a service after that, we've now created a warm weather plan. So we have trigger points within it. They've sent quite a few of us away on wildfire officer courses. So a few of us have been away and done wildfire officer courses. We've bought Polaris, we've bought wildfire hose. So we're a bit better prepared. That day is one that will definitely stick in my mind throughout my career. As like, I've never seen anything like that. It were phenomenal, to be fair, phenomenal.
And that's when people say, "Oh, and it's not like the good old days." No, you're right. It's not like that. It's just different. It's not better or worse, but it's still an incredible job. It's still really exciting. We still have to improvise, adapt, and overcome, and it still takes those really passionate, quirky, freaky, gregarious problem solvers all over. Men, women, old, young. We need them to keep coming into the sector. People like yourself that didn't intend on joining the fire and rescue service, but picked up a hybrid skill set because they were crap at school and couldn't get a real job. And then they become really useful in the emergency services. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And just some of the stories that came out of the wildfires, just prove exactly what you said, that the diversity of the organisation and the people within it, and the people who have got the ability to think outside the box and to sort of come up with things on the hop is what makes us and the rest of the emergency services. It's where the real value is in being as diverse as we are. That there's always someone on the pump or nearby who's got, like, I had an hydrochloric acid spill ages ago, and one of the lads walked up to me who I'd actually trained. He was one of our recruits, and he went, I used to work in a lab before I joined the fire service, and I worked with hydrochloric acid. I was like, right, come with me. Wandered him over there. I was like, right, talk to me about everything that you know about this. But that's the benefit in it.
That's it, mate.
And yeah, long may it continue. Yeah,
love it, guys. I want to be super respectful of your time. I know we're coming past midday on a Saturday afternoon, but I've absolutely loved that, mate. We've gone in a million different rabbit holes, and I think from TAC Vent to Grenfell to recruits to crossing over the different pathways in your career up until the wildfire stuff, there's so many little nuggets that when people wander into the forest of this conversation, we'll hopefully be able to walk away from. But I wonder if we could close a little bit of like people that are maybe moving out of a section, because after the COVID pandemic, a lot of people had that tactical pause and thought about what they enjoy doing, if they love it. And, we've had colossal amount of listenership, 400,000 people now listen to the pointless conversation, but exciting for me that we've just engaged in the last hour and a half, and they will be super excited and motivated. So I wanted to maybe ask, as corny as it will sound, like advice for anybody that is in their 20s, 30s, 40s, has just done a career switch, maybe like yourself. Would you do it again? Would you join the emergency services now? Because people say, oh, cultural this and that, and it's not like it used to be. And I still think it's incredible. I absolutely love it. I mean, would you join now? Because we're doing a lot of recruitment.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I tell anybody who will listen that, there's a fantastic career can be had here. And I have a bit of a saying that I said to recruits. I go back to see recruits now and do a bit of assessing and stuff in my role. And I always turn around to the recruits and say, look, in every walk of life, you're always going to find people who find something negative to say about everything.
Yeah.
It's up to you to make your decisions. I said, just remember that day, on day one, when you pulled that uniform on for the first time and you undoubtedly checked yourself in the mirror and you undoubtedly felt a swell of pride that I'm giving back to my community. I'm in a service that's respected by the public, because we still are.
Yeah.
And it's something to be proud of. I mean, I occasionally bob into the local supermarket in uniform on my way back to pick a few bits up, and it normally brings a bit of conversation and all that type of stuff. Yeah. It's still an amazing career. And I always said to him, I said, listen, when you get on station, or when you bump into people outside a station or in general life who are negative about the career and all that, remember, your career is unique to you. Mm-hmm. You be you. And you remember that day when you put that uniform on. And actually, if you ask yourself that question, where you put that uniform on and you still don't have that swell of pride, do you know what? Maybe it's not for you.
Yeah.
And you're not here.
It's okay as well.
I want people to be happy. I want people to enjoy their life. We only get one go. It's very short. Get one turn around. Just enjoy it. But yeah, I would 100% do it again. Yeah.
Mate, I've absolutely loved that. I'm going to drop that message tomorrow, because a massive thanks, because it's through conversations with people like that, and maybe with yourself, and then maybe I'll go on and speak to some experienced person from the air ambulance or wherever it might be. And it's those cultural touch points. It's making conversations with people and being willing, total honesty to yourself, coming on, taking a risk. Today's the first time we've ever had a conversation together. Could have gone in a million directions, and if you're willing to just put yourself out there, you'd be astonished the value you can add to other people and just make connections like this. So really appreciate that, my friend. Send my love to the family and everybody like that. Send my love to everybody back at the stations and stuff like that. And hopefully I'll catch up soon.
Top man. Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
The Firefighters podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our driving purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests. And as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means that we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, and please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you are in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.